ammonium nitrate. We're going to go to a time of some Q&A. Again, feel free to use the Q&A bar to submit your questions. I've got a couple that have come in already that I'd like to share. I think this first one may be for you, Peter, but it has to do with the firefighting suppression system. So the question is, even if there is firefighting and detection system installed, how could an explosion be prevented in a storage facility with ammonium nitrate? Is the water cool enough, or is it enough to cool the ammonium nitrate, or how does that mechanism work?
Yes, good question. So basically, if you have if you have if a fire happens into an ammonium nitrate store, and the fire is an external, it's not ammonium nitrate itself. And as we said before, the ammonium nitrate itself actually does not burn as such. Then the sprinkler system, if the temperature gets hot enough, a sprinkler system will start activating and will make sure that your fire will not spread enough and will control the fire. May not extinguish the fire, but will control the fire so that the temperatures don't increase to a level that what was said before, that you can have the decomposition of ammonium nitrate. As a matter of fact, water and exposed ammonium nitrate is also not good, because it makes the whole product, it absorbs the water, of course, and then the product becomes useless.
Great, thank you. Another question related to the Beirut incident, and this could go for anybody on the panel that wants to address this. What are some of the life safety considerations that happened here that would have been able to better protect and save lives in that case?
I will shortly answer on this. Maybe somebody else can also answer on this. But in general, if the designs, if the fire protection systems as required by the NFPA would be there, there is already a big likelihood that the explosion wouldn't have happened. Also, the storage arrangements and plays a role in this, but I'm sure that other people can also add on this.
Great. Thanks. Anyone else want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I was going to say, from that training perspective, as we always, hark back to that, looking at some of the identification factors, not only to identify that chemical was, or that hazardous materials was ammonium nitrate, early detection or early identification could have led to evacuations much sooner, quicker, and disengagement or defensive fire operations, knowing that the volatility of ammonium nitrate is what it is. So getting folks evacuated early and responders out of the area, understanding that at that point there is no positive outcome.
Bob?
Thank you. Yeah.
Bob, I can add a comment or two relative to Texas City.
Go ahead, Manny.
Well, basically, there was no way they could control that fire that started in Texas City. Aside from the fact that the young men that were dispatched to it had no training, there was a career officer there from the Dallas Fire Department who basically said, look, you can't control this. You don't have the resources, evacuate. And young people kind of think they can handle everything. I used to be that way myself, but I'm not young anymore. And they didn't do it. And they couldn't get out. There was nothing left to do except evacuate. And the place blew up and unfortunately killed the Dallas fire captain as well.
Okay, thank you, Manny. And I'll just add, having just done a 3-year program under FEMA for this particular topic and responding to these emergencies, one of the concepts we teach in a course, if there's ever an incident, particularly a fire involving ammonium nitrate, if it's beyond the incipient phase of the fire, the right call is to back off and evacuate the area to prevent loss of life. And that's right from, I believe, the NFPA guidance on that matter. Okay, I have a question here. Oh, go ahead.
May I ask Manny a question on the Texas City one? Am I correct, Manny, in that, yes, the fire was going and the firefighters were couldn't really go and put it out. But were the loaders, from what I've read, they were aware that the bags were hot as they were loading them? Was that correct?
I can't speak to that. I don't know that. I read the transcripts from all the witnesses, and I don't remember seeing that in there, okay? The problem from a standpoint of trying to fight that fire, and you folks that are firefighters, which I'm not, all those firefighters had was two 3/4 inch attack hoses that they were trying to fight that fire with. And that was about it. And I don't know anything about the fact that the bags were considered to be hot.
Thank you, Manny.
Thank you.
Sure.
Nigel, I was going to transition to a question for you related to electric vehicles. And you had mentioned these new batteries, lithium-ion batteries, and things that alternative fuels. I know it's been a huge issue here in the US when there's an incident, particularly a fire involving an electric vehicle. I was wondering if you would maybe speak to any types of strategies that you're aware of related to thermal runaway and vehicles that are involved in incident. Is that an immediate get out of the area, or are there things that can be done to mitigate and control that type of incident before it gets worse?
Yeah, so lithium ion, the first thing I need to say is that there's no lithium metal in that battery. So you're not going, and you can put water onto it, but it takes, from what we've seen, up to 10,000 litres to put enough cooling potential onto it to bring it under control. You've also got a lot of gases coming off, from hydrogen fluoride to phosphorus oxides and sulfur dioxide, a whole load of other things, which you're then going and putting water on and then getting an environmental risk. So you can put it out, you can go and attack it, but it may be you've got to go and sort of be careful with your approach. And there's a lot of, if anyone's interested, I can go and provide references and other bits to tactical stuff that we've discussed at CTIF, JOIF, and a few other places as well. So happy to go and provide that. And I know there's a lot of good work in the US. I think Brock Archer has been doing a very good part of it on the lithium-ion battery. And there is the information out there. We just got to share it. That's the main thing.
Great, thank you, Nigel. A question for Ed. This has to do with learning. I know you discussed kind of a blended learning model of online, in-person, hands-on kind of training. And with the move of what we've experienced over the last year, with a lot of virtual learning taking place and things shifting in that direction, there's obviously some benefits to different methods of learning, and also some drawbacks to different kinds of learning. And so I was wondering if maybe you would speak for a minute on those pros and cons of the blended learning model of, the virtual learning, what types of things can be learned well that versus virtual reality is becoming a up and coming method of instruction, as well as in person. Maybe you could compare and contrast those for us.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Bob. Very interesting subject, something that we're talking about with people a lot at the moment. So it's important that I get the point across that what we're not saying is that we get rid of the in-person model of training, because one of the things that I know and we know is that the figures can be debated, the percentages can be debated, but around about 70% of learning takes place on the job through practical hands-on learning. So when we get hands-on and we get in person with people, in person to do that training with people, it's really vital that we get that scenario-based on-the-job style training put in place. But what we can do to supplement that training, it's a model called the flipped classroom. So we can forward information to people, and we do that utilizing the best subject matter experts that we can find in the field. And that may be that we need a mixture of those subject matter experts. We need chemists where a chemist is suitable. I need a sector competent chemist in emergency response where they're suitable. I need somebody who's into detection, identification, and monitoring where they're suitable, to deliver pre-recorded live information using virtual classrooms. And that is suitable to send out up front for certain subjects. And things like incident scene management, proportionality, I'm pointing up here because this is all the list of my presentations that I've developed so in the last few months. And then information gathering, basic chemistry and physical properties. And using technology, we can create high quality videos in virtual classrooms and send them out to people. And of course, it's really important though that we support people with any queries that they have, because what we don't want is people spending hours and hours looking for further information when actually we're here to supply that for them. But it is a great way of saying to people, you can do something now. I know you can't necessarily travel for the entirety of this or even at this point, but there is something that you can do to make sure your crews are still safe and effective.
Great. Thank you, Ed. I'm going to wrap it up with one more question. I'll just leave this open for all of our panelists if anybody has anything to say about this. But one question came in about this idea or concept that, do we think hazmat is such a massive topic, something's just so complex and beyond, our ability to handle, that organizations tend to steer clear of dealing with competencies and governance? And maybe Chad, I know you spoke a lot about competencies. Maybe start with you, and then we can kind of kick this around a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. So I was a fire chief in the capital of California, or just outside the capital of California, for 5 years or so. And one of the things that hazmat poses as a public service or emergency response organization is that hazmat doesn't happen every day. Hazmat is a super high risk, super low frequency occurring event. And so I think a lot of times that complacency bug comes into our minds, and it's out of sight, out of mind. So let's focus on the EMS, the trauma, the structure fires, the vehicle accidents, because we do that every day and we're really good at it in the public safety arena. The caveat being, hazmat again is low risk or a high risk, low frequency. We get the necessary initial training, and then it's kind of back of the classroom with hazardous materials components. So I would say that hazmat needs to be looked at as an ever evolving skill or discipline within our public safety arena, that just because you took a hazmat technician course or a specialist course or did a pre-plan 5 years ago, that training may be outdated by that time based on some of the presentations you've seen today. Technology increases, advancements in capabilities, all sorts of equipment increases. So that's what I would say is, it is a big, I would say an elephant, right? It's a huge elephant. And where do you take the first bite if you're trying to make your way through that thing? It's a lot to undertake when you evaluate that. So that would be my answer. I'd look to the others for other perspective.
Thank you, Chad. Anyone else like to take a shot at that?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that we're trying to do is create a bit of a mindset change, Bob, because the majority of incidents that we go to have the potential to have an element of hazardous materials involved with them. So what Chad says there is absolutely spot on: low frequency, high risk events. But when we think about hazmat, or when a lot of people still think about hazmats these days, they're thinking about traditional, maybe a white powder incident, maybe a tanker incident, but we're going to so many more incidents nowadays, and we know so much more. An example of this would be a car fire is a hazmat incident. A house fire is a hazmat incident. It's got a lot of the United Nations classes of hazardous materials in a house fire, especially in the closing down phases when we're doing the turning over, the post-fire investigation. And it's about changing mindsets at the top of the organizations as well, to make sure that we can adopt appropriate training models throughout, because, and again, like Chad says, training happens in the initial phases, in my experience, for specialist teams, but then the CPD, the continuous professional development, is lacking, and we need that enforcing with legislation.
Good. Anyone else have anything to add?
Yeah, I can add on the whole hazmat from a design perspective, and my experience with dealing with approving authorities when it comes to fire safety of buildings, you will see that there's a lot of expertise in the design of residential buildings, even shopping malls, even schools, etc., etc., ordinary type of buildings. But when it comes to this hazardous materials and even flammable and combustible liquids, then suddenly you will find that approval authorities, they feel uncomfortable on making decisions on this kind of structures or dealing with this kind of products. And that is a little bit of an issue because it is quite specialized, and therefore they should get the likes of you and everybody in assisting them in the design.
Great. Well, let me add one little plug in here, something that we talked about during the break as panelists. When we talk about competencies, I know Chad took a part of his presentation to emphasize the NFPA 472 standard and what's out there for training competencies. We've also talked about emerging technologies such as detectors and things like that. And so I'd just like to refer you to something that you may not be aware of because it may not be in the mainstream in the fire service, but the AIHA, formerly known as the American Industrial Hygiene Association, recently published a direct reading instrument body of knowledge that spells out competencies for different types of users involved in use of detectors and employment of those. And so I would just plug that. I believe it's a free resource on their website, AIHA, and it may be worth looking at from a competency standpoint for how different detectors are employed and who's responsible for what. So with that, I would like to thank everyone, thank our attendees and all those who have participated as I hand it back over to Philip here. We appreciate you attending this afternoon. I hope you've taken something away, learned something new, and we'll be able to implement something that you've heard today. Philip, I'd like to turn it back over to you.